I'm going to show you how to really simply quintuple or 5 times your ores in Mekanism. It is a complex process, but let's make it simple. To start off, I want to let you know that I'm going to be using these wool. The wool represents the production lines, where the red line is where your ore is traversing down. So our ores are going to go in from this chest, and they are only going to travel down this red line. I will separate this into chapters so you can see what we're doing at doubling, tripling, quadrupling, and quintupling. So starting off then, we're going to have obviously our output chest. This is where the ingots go in. So I'm actually working this through backwards because I think it's easier to digest. You want to make an energized smelter, and that's where your osmium dust will come in. After that, behind it, you want to make an enrichment chamber, and that is where your dirty osmium dust will come in. So to double our ores, we're going to go enrichment chamber, into a smelter, ta-da, we have done it. After that, you're going to add in a crusher. So the crusher then goes into the enrichment chamber. At this point, we're nearly tripling. You're going to put behind the crusher a purification chamber. Now, it's good to note that the crusher, the enrichment chamber, and the smelter don't need anything else. The purification chamber will. So to triple our ores, we're going to put oxygen into our purification chamber, and then the ores are going to travel down. To make oxygen, we're going to pump water into an electrolytic separator. It will separate the water into hydrogen and oxygen. Press dump excess on both of these buttons so they don't get clogged up. Hydrogen will always come out the left, and oxygen will always come out of the right. I do actually have a separate tutorial on my channel, which I will put in the description for this machine. So again, pump out water into the electrolytic separator. Hydrogen will come out the left, oxygen will come out the right. The blue route is oxygen, the grey route is hydrogen. So we're pumping out the hot oxygen into our purification chamber, where our iron shards will get turned into iron clumps. So just to recap on tripling, purification chamber, shards with oxygen will turn into clumps. We then crush them into dirty ores with the crusher, purify them into clean ores with the enrichment chamber, and then smelt them with the energized smelter. And at that point, we are tripling our ores. After that, we're going to go one step further, where the ores are going to come in through the chemical injection chamber. And you can see here, they're going to get turned into shards. So this is step 4, where we're obviously quadrupling our ores at the chemical injection chamber. Again, the ores are only going down this red line. So we're going to need that hydrogen from earlier. What we're going to put into here is hydrogen chloride. So make your chemical injection chamber, and then we're going to look at getting hydrogen chloride. How do we get that? Well, let's start from the start. We're going to need this big, great behemoth, which is a thermal evaporation block. You make these thermal evaporation blocks. You're going to need a controller and a few valves. It's 4 by 4. You can make it up to 17 in height. You don't need corners on it. And the interior is empty apart from the bottom. This is going to use water and heat to basically ferment it into brine. I'm using power into a resistive heater, into a valve through a thermodynamic conductor to heat up the tank. It will do it naturally in a hot biome as well, but I'm in a cold biome. And I'm going to use a water pump into another valve. In the controller, I can see that water and heat is making brine. I do also have a full tutorial on this, again, in the description of this video. Same with the water pump. I've got one of those in the description as well. We're going to pump out the brine using another valve, and it's going to go into an electrolytic separator again. But this time, we're actually separating brine into sodium and chlorine. We're dumping the excess, or all of the sodium. It doesn't matter. We just don't want to clog it up. We're outputting the chlorine, however, into a chemical infuser, into the right-hand side. Into the right-hand side is the chlorine, and in the left-hand side is the hydrogen that we made earlier. So again, the grey route is hydrogen. Chlorine route is the blue route. The hydrogen and the chlorine will make hydrogen chloride, which you can pump out into your chemical injection chamber. So just to recap on that, because it's starting to get complex, to 4 times our ores, we need a chemical injection chamber with hydrogen chloride. That again goes into the purification chamber with oxygen, then into the crusher, then into the enrichment chamber, and then into the smelter. Again, to make the hydrogen chloride, you're going to need to pump in water and heat through 2 valves, again a resistive heater, a water pump, into a thermal evaporation block, 4x4. Interior is empty. You need a controller, makes water and heat into brine. That goes into an electrolytic separator, brine, dump the sodium on the left, output the chlorine on the right, into a chemical infuser, input hydrogen into the left of the chemical infuser, and chlorine on the right. Hydrogen can come from your one earlier, or make a separate one, it's up to you, and output that into your chemical injection chamber. And now you've quadrupled your ores. We then have one last step, of course, which is 5 timesing our ore. We're going to go all the way up here, and the ores are actually going to go into a chemical dissolution chamber. So after you 4 times them, on the back of that, you make a chemical crystallizer. Doesn't really need anything off the side of it. But before that, you make a chemical washer. And before that, you make the chemical dissolution chamber. So as you can see, there's quite a lot of stuff going on here. Let's start off with the left-hand side, where again, you can see is our... Now, remember over here, I said that the blue line is the hydrogen chloride line. Well, we're actually going to be putting hydrogen chloride into this machine here. What I've done, if you're thinking how did it come from here, it's actually up here. You can see what I've done is the hydrogen chloride coming out the front of here. I've also got it coming all the way from my 5-step down here. You can also use wool if it helps you remember what's going where. So again, we're going to put hydrogen chloride into a chemical injection chamber. Now, what we're actually going to put into this chemical injection chamber is gunpowder. So we're going to use the hydrogen chloride that we've made earlier in step 4, and we're going to put in gunpowder into a chemical injection chamber. That's actually going to make sulfur. The sulfur is then going, this is the sulfur line. The sulfur is then going to go down into a chemical oxidizer. Once it's gone through the chemical oxidizer, it's going to go into a chemical infuser, and it's actually going to make sulfur dioxide. We're then going to put in oxygen with the sulfur dioxide. Now, because it would get a bit complex, I've made another chemical infuser here rather than using the one from earlier. We are going to need that oxygen for something else as well, and it's all going to get quite silly. So again, your hydrogen chloride that we made in step 4, you're going to put into a chemical injection chamber with gunpowder. That's going to go through a chemical oxidizer, the sulfur will, making sulfur dioxide. And then you're going to put that with oxygen in a chemical infuser. So sulfur dioxide and oxygen, and that will make sulfur trioxide. As you can see here, I'm pumping out of another water pump, making electrolytic separator, getting rid of the hydrogen, and the oxygen is being supplied here. One thing you do need to be careful with is your pipes. If you put this pipe here, you don't know if it's going to go to oxygen or water. Sorry, oxygen or the sulfur trioxide. So do be careful not to clog your pipes. You could see before I'd made an accident. I just had to fix it. So we're taking in the oxygen into the chemical infuser. It's making sulfur trioxide. We're then going to bring that over with water vapor. How do we make water vapor? Well, that water that you're using to make your oxygen from the electrolytic separator, you're going to put it into a rotary condensator, and that will make the water into water vapor. Push that with your sulfur trioxide into a chemical infuser, and it will make sulfuric acid. Then we pump the sulfuric acid into the chemical dissolution chamber. And that, with the sulfuric acid, will make your raw iron into a slurry. The slurry, you need a pressurized tube for this. It's a gas, technically. Will come into your chemical washer. So you've got dirty iron slurry with water. So you're washing those chemicals with water, and that will make clean iron slurry. In another pressurized tube, that comes through to the chemical crystallizer. Here you can see I've got some osmium in here, so it's gotten a bit, stuck. But let's imagine it didn't. The clean iron slurry would then crystallize into ore, and then with a logistical transporter, we can take it through to step 4. So just to go through that one more time on step 5, we're going to put our hydrogen chloride from earlier into the chemical injection chamber with gunpowder. That's going to make sulfur. Sulfur goes into the chemical oxidizer to make sulfur dioxide. put that in here with oxygen to get sulfur trioxide, go into a chemical infuser with water vapor that is made by rotary condensating water into vapor, and that will make you your sulfuric acid. Sulfuric acid goes into the chemical dissolution chamber where you can kind of melt down your ores pretty much. So on the red line then, your ores come in to the chemical dissolution chamber, pressurized pipe into a chemical washer with water, pressurized pipe into a crystallizer, logistical pipe into a chemical injection chamber, again with hydrogen chloride that's made through this situation in chapter 4. That comes through to the purification chamber in chapter 3, and then it comes through to the crusher, and then in chapter 2, the enrichment chamber and the smelter. Now, as I said, it is quite complex, so hopefully that all made sense. Do go back and watch each chapter if you are confused. What I would recommend is watch chapter 2 and build it. Then add on with chapter 3. Then add on with chapter 4 and then chapter 5. And if you do it in bite-sized chunks like that, it should be easier to understand. You could also use wool, like I have, or something similar, to visualize what it is you're doing. And again, if you need any advice or tutorials on how to make the water pump and use that, I've got a tutorial, it's in the description. How to use the electrolytic separator, there's a tutorial in the description. How to make brine and chlorine, etc. with this whole situation, there's another guide in the description. And then this whole part is really just chapter 5 that you're going to have to watch at the moment. But I may do a guide for this bit separately. If you did enjoy it, please do obviously leave a like and subscribe. I've done loads of Mekanism tutorials, and I will be doing other Minecraft mod tutorials for you. And do consider joining the Patreon if you found it helpful, as it really helps support the channel. You can click the playlist you can see now above as well and see all of my Minecraft videos.